Are you familiar with the expression being voluntold? Being voluntold. Basically what happens is you're maybe in a group or organization and they say, okay, we're accepting volunteers for something coming up. But then what ends up happening is someone just goes and tells people what they need to volunteer for. In the church, of course, we can be quite good at that. I'm guilty of doing it myself on a number of occasions. This Sunday, however, we have the opportunity to reflect as a parish community on service, on ministry. We're going to have, after Mass, our ministry fair in the hall. We're going to have the opportunity to go and to see the different ministries and groups we have in our parish community. Liturgical ministries, ministries focused on education, ministries focused on service. We'll have that opportunity to go to recognize those involved in ministry and even consider what ministries we might want to be involved in. Truth be told, there'll probably be some voluntolding happening during this ministry fair, but also the readings, especially the first readings, are an opportunity for us to think about what it means to serve, why we do it, why is it that we minister. And here we can not just think about serving in the church, but even serving in our family, our place of work, our school, or any sort of community. Why is it that we serve? Do we serve because we feel compelled to do so? Do we serve out of a sense of guilt? What is the spiritual motivation that really gets us to go forward to serve and to minister to those around us? The first reading from the prophet Isaiah declares or describes this servant of Israel. And in this passage, we hear some great guidelines and inspiration for why it is that we should serve. First and foremost, in the prophet Isaiah, we see an important and fundamental truth. Before even considering service, we need to first consider our identity. Who we are in God's eyes precedes what we are called to do. Now, I think for a lot of us, we can fall into this trap. I know I do. We can judge our value by what we do. We can think people will only love me, care for me, see that I'm a good person if I'm doing certain things. This is a way of thinking that our value, our dignity, comes after this idea of mission or service. Isaiah today gives a completely different perspective, the perspective really of God. We read in the first reading, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. I have called you by name." So today, of course, we reflect on service and ministries, but we should remind ourselves that even before thinking about any kind of groups or ministries we might feel called to at this particular time in our life, we need to remind ourselves of an important truth. Before any kind of service, God already knows us. God already loves us. God already appreciates who we are. This identity is fundamental. We don't need to earn God's love. We don't need to go and do certain things to be approved of by others. That dignity, that identity comes first. From this, then, we see an important development in the prophet Isaiah. That identity of being beloved sons and daughters of God comes first. But really, then, we are loved into service. It is this love, this groundedness of our identity that inspires us to serve and minister to those around us. Now, sometimes two images are presented of how God's grace, God's life, works in our own hearts. And these images have to do with how water can move or be contained. So one of these images has to do about how God's grace, the metaphor of water, passes through us, kind of like a channel of water. Imagine, for example, a riverbed that's solid rock, and the water is just passing through it very rapidly. As time progresses, that riverbed, that rock is worn down. It's washed away. This is one way that water can be transmitted. Another that we can think about is a glass of water that is filled to the brim. And after that glass of water is filled, the water spills out over the top. Now, it could be helpful for us to consider this second image of how God's grace acts in our life. If we think that God's grace just simply passes through us, then at times like that riverbed, we can get worn down. We can burn out when we are trying to serve. We need to recognize we should be serving out of an overflow of that love that God has for us. That God's love and grace is like the water that fills our cup, that fills our hearts, and spills out to those around us. Still, of course, from time to time when we serve or minister, it's difficult, it's challenging, it's not always the easiest thing, but we need to recognize that that ministry, that service, should come, at least we should believe it to come, from that overflow of God's love that He pours into our hearts. We're these glasses that are full to the brim and spreading God's life and grace to those around us. We are truly then loved into service. Finally, from Isaiah, we come to see that when we serve, we're not alone. We are all, each of us, a community. We all serve in different ways and maybe even in different times in our life. We see that all of Israel in the first reading is called the servant of the Lord. All of them are called to carry God's light to the nations. St. Paul does such a great way of describing this in his letters, of how we are, all of us, the body of Christ. We are the presence of Christ in the world. We are bringing God's love and peace to those around us. And like every body has different parts, so too each of us in our community have different roles based on our talents. Even our season of life could be at this particular time in our life, we are not able to serve because of other different commitments. But each of us are called to serve in a specific way. When we consider then service or ministry, we shouldn't think, okay, where is this need maybe the highest, or where do I feel pressured, or where are people kind of pulling me into service? We should ask ourselves maybe this question: based on the talents, the time that God has given me in this time in my life, how is God calling me to spread His love to those around us? This really is all our ministries and groups in our parish community aiming to do, aiming to communicate God's love, peace, and goodness to the world around us. This Sunday, then, we have the opportunity to reflect upon ministry and service. Let us remind ourselves of these important messages from Isaiah, that we really first receive that identity, to be beloved sons and daughters of God. And this is the identity that calls us into service. We're loved into service. We shouldn't, at least not always, feel perhaps guilted or impelled by others into doing this. We're loved by God to serve. And finally, just to leave us with the wise words from Mother Teresa, she would often remind us that ultimately service leads to joy. When we're able to use our gifts to serve and minister to others, it leads to joy. As she often said, joy is the fruit of service.